Hey everyone, Mia here from Resonance Astrology, and welcome to this week's weekly overview where we're going to talk about what is going on in the cosmos, what is going on in the sky, because as above, so below, we're going to talk about May 4th till May 10th of 2026. And I want to start off with two things. First of all, thank you so much for everyone who resonated with the Scorpio full moon video. That's always very beautiful and meaningful to see for me, especially because Scorpio lunations tend to just be filled with a lot of tensions and they aren't so easy to go through. But I think there's a lot of potential in this one particular because we have Mars as the ruler, right? I mean, we had Mars as the ruler, but Mars is still in the sign of Aries, and we're starting off this week with Mars in Aries squaring Jupiter, exalted in Cancer. So while squares have tension, this is tension between two planets that are both very resourced, right? Because Jupiter is exalted, Mars is in domicile. And I think that's what's interesting in how this story continues, really, because we're getting two full moons in the month of May, with the second one in Sagittarius at the end of the month, ruled by that same Jupiter. So there is something building and something that is very much developing. And we also start off this week with the moon being in Sagittarius, which I think already shifted the tone a bit. I think, let me know how you guys have felt, but Sunday definitely for me felt noticeably a lot lighter compared to the intensity of Friday and Saturday. And at the same time, we have something really interesting happening with Mercury and Venus as well. I mentioned it last week, but it's good to repeat. Mercury is now officially in Taurus and Venus is in Gemini already since a while, but they are now officially in mutual reception. That means they're in each other's ruling signs. And normally Taurus and Gemini don't see each other because they're in aversion. They're right next to each other. Like they don't share a traditional aspect. But that mutual reception creates a bridge, right? It's like a hidden ace card. So suddenly there is a dialogue that is happening between these two parts of life and of these signs, between, your Taurus house and your Gemini house, that normally wouldn't communicate that easily or necessarily see each other. So there is a kind of translation that is happening, which I think is very beautiful. And now let's zone out just a bit because I want to say something about May and June in general, because astrologically these months are quieter, but quiet does not mean necessarily easier. And I really want to move us away from this narrative or very binary way of thinking of, is this a good month or is this a bad month? Because I think a lot of people come to astrology and they watch these monthly overviews or weekly overviews or yearly overviews and with just one question in mind, like, is this going to be a good or bad month? Is this going to be a good or bad year? And that framing doesn't really serve you nor me nor really anyone, because astrology is obviously, but in case it wasn't obvious, far more nuanced than just that. And your experience of a month depends on your entire chart, on your specific timing and how you engage with what is happening. So yes, compared to the beginning of the year, which was full of major ingresses and intense transits and like just one after another, May and June are calmer and they're going to feel calmer. But that doesn't mean certain transits won't hit hard for you personally, because for example, anyone with early degrees of mutable placements is still very much getting hit with Uranus and Gemini right now. So I do think, everything with astrology is less about good or bad or like good versus bad. It's more about the fact that is something pleasant or is something unpleasant, because in the grand scheme of things, we never know how an initial moment is going to affect us for the long run. We just don't know. A lot of experiences that are maybe very unpleasant in the moment turn out to be some of the moments where we're like, oh, that was so important and necessary to happen in my life. So in general, also when I'm reading charts, I really differ from being like, oh, this is good or bad. Like it's very black and white thinking. I really like to view things more as unpleasant or pleasant, because that is how you're going to experience things in the moment. Yes, but again, May and June, they are gonna be realistically with the planets, there isn't so much going on. It's gonna be like less crowded and fast paced because we had so many like bam bam bam, you know, since the year started. We were overflowing, and I do think this is actually really nice because it is giving us a lot more space to actually work with what has already happened or been set in motion, right? Not everything always has to be grand or crazy. And again, it also still depends on your chart. And actually, also speaking of May and June being a bit more spacious, this is also why I'm currently planning a small astrology summer get together in Croatia, on the beautiful island of Kirk. This is where we have our space. It is also my personal space. I've spent my entire childhood there, but I want to open it up to people and do more retreats myself, like my mother did so many years from now. So this is not meant to be something that is super structured. It is not an intense workshop. And it's also really more about having the space to live with astrology, to observe, to share, to be in the rhythm with the transits together, to be with people that when you're like, because it's going to be in the week where we have the solar eclipse in the sign of Leo, and we're going to have Mars moving into the sign of Cancer. So I want to be with fellow people that are going to get it. You know, when you walk out at the beach and someone's going to be like, oh, that is so Mars in Cancer. And everybody's like, yes, girl. So it's really like for fellow astrologers and really for people mainly from and that are from or live in Europe. And so if that is something that speaks to you or it piqued your interest, I'll leave more information down below. There is a questionnaire, a form that you can fill out, and then I'm going to get back to everyone personally because it's going to be very intimate and very curated. Yes, so just wanted to mention it here at this point. The link to sign up, you're not committing yourself to anything yet, is going to be down below. I'm super happy if you're interested and just, you know, have the courage to sign up if you want to. And again, I'm going to talk to everyone personally. I want to curate this group so it really fits. Again, more information's down below. And now let's get back to the actual week in and of itself, because at the very beginning of this week, initially mentioned this, we have Mars and Aries squaring Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. And I want us to stay with this for a moment because this is a major activation point of this week. There aren't a lot of transits happening this week, so we have two focal points. We're going to get to the next one in a second. So once again, both planets incredibly strong. Mars in Aries in its own sign, in its domicile. Jupiter in Cancer in its sign of exaltation. So the tension that is coming here isn't necessarily coming from lack or anything like that. Tension here is coming from two forces that are both powerful and both ready to move. And they want you to move. And Mars in Aries is really kind of a planet that acts from instinct when it's in its domicile, from immediacy, and from that natural, like instinctual sense in the body of like, ooh, I gotta do this now, you know. And Jupiter in Cancer expands through emotional truth, through care, through what actually feels safe and meaningful. So there can be this moment when you feel pulled between, you know, wanting to act in quickly or wanting to act in alignment and wanting to act on your desires immediately or your emotional truth, or wanting to move something and wanting to have something have deeper meaning. And because Jupiter amplifies really whatever it touches and Mars accelerates whatever it touches, this can feel like things are suddenly speeding up and becoming bigger at the same time. And I saw this quote earlier today that feels very aligned with what is happening here, and it goes like this: suddenly your faith starts to outshine your fear, and that's really when everything changes. And I think this captures the higher expression, I would say, of this transit also so incredibly well, because Mars can act out of fear. Mars oftentimes acts out of fear because Mars activates these primal instinct, you know, it's very much this like fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses. And so Jupiter kind of chimes in here and asks us, well, but what do you believe in and what are you growing towards? So the question with this square becomes, are you moving from fear or are you moving from your faith? Because both of them will create movement. And you can also move from both of them, by the way. That is also a possibility. But they can sometimes tend to take us in different directions, right? And that's kind of the tension from the square. But yes, basically when your actions are actually rooted in something you trust and believe in, which is like that Jupiterian aspect of this is when this transit has the potential to become incredibly powerful. And that's when it's not just a reaction, but it's like an intentional movement in your body, in your mind, you know, what they say, when what you think, what you say, and what you do aligns. This is what true alignment feels like. And I think this transit most definitely certainly has the potential for this to happen. And I think maybe it's not just a process of just the beginning of this week. It might be a process throughout the whole month of May, right? Because it's kind of linking both of the full moons that we are getting. We had that Scorpio full moon, ruler Mars. And once again, just sorry if I'm repeating myself, but sometimes we need repetition. At end of the month, full moon in Sagittarius, ruler is Jupiter. Yes. And then let's move on to the next transit, because after that, like kind of midweek, we have Mercury in Taurus squaring Pluto in Aquarius. We get another square. The only two transit we are getting this week. Well, we do have Mercury also doing a thing afterwards. But I think the squares are more important, so it's interesting we're getting two square aspects. And so Mercury squares Pluto first, then immediately after, Mercury sextiles the North Node in Pisces and trines the South Node in the sign of Virgo. So Mercury is really acting like a messenger, which Mercury usually does anyways, moving through the different realms here, first confronting Pluto, then connecting to the nodes. And Mercury-Pluto contacts are always very interesting for me, because for me, Pluto, right, is Hades, is the underworld. And Mercury really, or Hermes, in mythology, was the only god that could move from the upper to the underworld. And so when they make a contact together, and especially in a square, there is something like from your subconscious usually that is trying or wanting to get released, right? It needs to come. Hermes goes down to the underworld, goes down to your subconscious and wants to pull out something so it makes it visible for you, because so you can face your subconscious shadows, right? Like in a very Jungian archetypal way. It's so that you can face your shadows, so that you see what the frick is actually going on here, and then things become much less scary, right? And actually, I actually think this is just coming up for me right now, and I hope I'm not butchering the quote here. Let me actually fully Google this so I'm saying it correctly, because there's a Jung quote that I really love with this. I want to say it correctly. Yeah, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is, I mean, the fact that also Mercury right after squaring Pluto is sextiling the North Node in Pisces and trining the South Node in Virgo. There is a lot of fate interplayed in all of this. And what happens afterwards with Pluto? Pluto stations retrograde. And now Pluto goes retrograde every year for about half the year. So the retrograde itself isn't really like unusual or anything. But the stations, in my opinion, are always very, very powerful, because this is where the planet is most concentrated in its energy. And what makes this especially interesting, right, is that Pluto is receiving that square from Mercury right before it stations retrograde. And then this quote comes into play, right? Until we make the conscious, I removed the tab. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So there can definitely be realizations, big time conversations, again, with yourself or with other people, information surfacing. I mean, Mercury is in mutual reception with Venus, right? So I do think there is a lot of like relational things that could be coming up for you through other people, like maybe you having a conversation, like mirroring, like the mirroring type of thing, especially in these topics of Gemini and Taurus, wherever they are in your chart, like whichever houses they rule. and make something visible that usually doesn't happen, right? Because Gemini and Taurus don't see each other otherwise. So definitely feels like they are initiating that retrograde process, a very, very powerful one. And also more broadly about Pluto, I do think that's worth sitting with just for a moment. You know, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune all have fully shifted their signs this year. Pluto a bit longer, but Uranus and Neptune most definitely are now fully in their new respective signs. And they're all interacting this year. Okay, we're in a period right now, this year especially, where the outer planets are essentially reconfiguring the larger patterns of our lives. But also obviously not just our personal lives, because it's also collective. The outer planets talk so much about the collective, but again, the collective and the internal world are both kind of a reflection of one another. And as these planets go retrograde one by one and they make contacts with each other, they are going to be revisiting and reinforcing the new terrain that we have been stepping into and that we are going to continue to be stepping into. So again, even if this week feels a bit more quieter on the surface, there is a deeper process unfolding underneath. A lot of subconscious things coming up. Again, with Jupiter and Mercury, you know, there is always this feeling. I think Jupiter and Mercury are sometimes hard to grasp because they're so intangible, because a lot of, like, Mercury is so much of our thought process and Jupiter is about our beliefs, and that's not really something you can see. But so, and this week it's almost as if we like can kind of get a glimpse of it in a more tangible way. Yes. And towards the end of the weeks, really, like, come Thursday through Sunday, really, things are softening out, because on Friday, the moon moves into Aquarius, staying there for most of the weekend, and we get that last quarter moon in Aquarius on Saturday, which is that point of integration and release, and it is really preparing us for the upcoming new moon in Taurus next week. And then on Sunday, the moon moves into Pisces, bringing a more reflective and inward tone. There aren't, like, it's just the moon moving. The other planets, like, there aren't any other transits really going on. So that's what I meant, right? Like, May is definitely a much more quiet month, transit-wise. Yes, and to briefly look ahead into next week, again, we have a potent one coming up. We have a Taurus new moon. We have Mercury, Sun conjunct in Taurus. We have Mars conjunct Chiron that is happening on that day of the new moon in Taurus. And then Mercury immediately also moves into Gemini right after, which is crazy. I was looking at that. I was like, what? Mercury just moved into Taurus and now Mercury's already moving into Gemini like a week later. What? But it's true. Mercury is super fast. It's just, we're going to have these retrogrades all in water signs. We had it in Pisces, we're going to have it in Cancer, and then later on in autumn we're going to have it in Scorpio, and it's all going to be in that one sign. Sometimes Mercury retrogrades happen across signs, so that's why the water periods when Mercury is in a water sign, they're going to feel very, very long. The other ones are going to pass quite quickly. But yeah, we're going to discuss that later on once Mercury moves into Cancer, of course. Yes. So again, overall, I would say this week is less about constant external events and more about processing, integrating, and preparing, and really facing the subconscious in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think we're all given more space, which I'm welcoming very much, to actually work with what is already in motion or what has already been set in motion over the beginning of this year, and integrate it all a bit more, because that's what we need, right? Like, and again, we're still in Taurus season, which is a great reminder to not make rest. And yet another thing that you have to check off your to-do list, you can just do it simply because you need to, your body needs to. We're going to talk about more on that with a Taurus new moon. But this is what I have for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any words you wish to share, you're always welcome to comment down below. And I'm gonna talk to you very, very soon. Much love. Bye for now.